Good morning, everybody. So I was telling a friend of mine I was going to be on this panel, and they said, good luck. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, you're not as good looking as Will, you're not as smart as Jay, and you're certainly not as funny as Welcome. So it's like, all right, thanks for that support. We've talked a lot about the economy, and I just want to talk about some big picture themes. Predominantly, I'm going to talk about office. If I get started on mixed use, we'll be here till drinks and dinner. And I think everybody knows what's going on in the Houston economy from an office standpoint in terms of job growth. It's sort of what parts of that job growth are actually driving office demand. And so the good news is we've had great growth in education and health, professional business, energy, obviously, information technology, and financial, and all those things drive office demand. In the energy sector specifically, you know, the rule of thumb is one direct energy job's creating 4 additional jobs in Houston. And so there's a real multiplier effect in the energy business and its growth. But, you know, I think we have to be careful. We see job growth, but the question is, as we keep going, what is the makeup of that job growth? It's just not the number. And so an economist, well-known, you would know him. Recently I was talking to him, and I said, what is the thing in the job growth number we have to worry about? And he said, what you have to worry about from an office perspective is the job growth is going from the west side to the east side of Houston. So the makeup of that, whatever that number is, 90,000 a year, is actually changing. And so in the energy business in 2011, we had 10% job growth. In 13, we had 12. I'm sorry, in 12, we had 12%, and in 13, we had 6%. So you're starting to see that taper a little bit. And if you think about how the energy business has changed, in a simplistic nature, I think about it as it used to be focused on how do we find it. Well, that's not really the challenge anymore. They're pretty darn good at knowing where the oil is. So now the business has changed to how do we get it out of the ground faster and cheaper. And those are different jobs. And so if you really look at the profile of the jobs that are being generated, they're almost like technology jobs. And so that has had a huge impact. But I do think we've sort of gone through massive growth in that, and then it's going to taper a little bit. So we got to be aware of that. The lifestyle shifts, and as a Houstonian, I'm incredibly proud of this. But you know, I heard Mayor Parker say this, that you know, Houston has always been known as a great place to work, but she wants it to be known as a great place to live. And you know, there's a lot of cool places to live in the U.S. where you can't get a job, and we've always been a good place to get a job. But I think now we sort of have the secret sauce that, you know, now it's a great place to get a job and a great place to live. And I feel like we were kind of Houston was the high schooler with kind of gawky and acne and braces, and went off to college and grew up and came back, and now we're really hot. And so I'm going to stick with that. And I tell everybody that Houston's hot. The other thing is about office. The office worker is different. And we know the big demographic shifts. And so in the big office populations, obviously what's happened is the baby boomers are exiting the workforce, and those jobs are largely being filled by kind of Generation Y and partly X. And their attitude towards work, the places they work in, are different. And I think you're seeing a lot of, especially corporations, respond to that. You know, I imagine Exxon's campus is going to look something more like probably what, you know, Google's campus looks like at the end of the day. And I think some of that is the type of the worker, and some of it's the type of work they're doing. And I think the other big trend is, from an investment standpoint, is we are finally the third coast, if you will. And so now, from an investment standpoint, whether that's acquisitions, development, we are looked at as a core investment market. And so we're in the same discussion with Boston and Washington, D.C., and San Francisco, and sort of all those, what everybody called the gateway markets. And so I think that's been a huge fundamental shift in terms of how real estate is coming about and how it's being fueled by capital. This is a great graphic that our friends at JLL produce in their market reports, and it's kind of essentially a clock. And so you look at the various Houston office markets, and are they a falling market, a stabilizing market, a rising market, or a peaking market? And the 6, kind of what we call the 6 core office markets in Houston, which is Greenway, Galleria, West Chase, Katy Freeway, Woodlands, and CBD, they're all either rising or peaking. And so, but I think there's interesting things like Midtown, which is sort of a stabilizing market. I think you're going to see some more office development and different types of office development now outside of the core markets. And they may not be, giant buildings, but I think as sort of the urban core, if you will, matures, there's going to be more office development in some of those non-typical markets. So this is a map from our friends at JLL, and don't worry, I'm going to make the dots bigger. So this is a map of new development, and so this is a lot of the major. We always look at what are the corporate campuses doing, and so obviously you've got the top one's actually Anadarko, and then just below that you've got Exxon, and you got Southwest Energy. Not on this map is Noble, which is up 249 at the old. I'm going to say Compact. That's really going to date me. Hewlett-Packard campus. And I'd probably say that, and some people in this room would be like, what, Compact? You got Chevron, obviously expanding downtown, which I think is a great thing for downtown. You got Hillcorp building their new corporate headquarters. You got Phillips 66 in West Chase, and then not on this map, you got TI building a new facility in Sugar Land. So those always sort of present a backdrop, and I think no different than what these guys have been talking about. If you sort of see where a lot of this office development or corporate campuses occur, it certainly has significant impact on Grand Parkway and where all those employees are going to live and shop. So this is the fun one, is the next one. So this is the market development. So this is the stuff all of us developers are doing. And so, again, if you want to think about the implications on Grand Parkway, just look at that map. That represents somewhere around 9 million square feet of development, which is a lot. So you've got one building downtown, you've got two in Greenway, one of which is ours, you've got a couple in the Galleria, and then predominantly you have a ton in the energy corridor, and then going down to West Chase. And I'll talk about sort of supply and demand in a minute. And then these are just a couple other build-to-suit projects. So this is the good news. So we have about 11.5 million square feet under construction. 8.5 million of that is pre-leased, so we're 75% leased on that pipeline, and that's fantastic. And but especially in like the energy corridor, I feel like it's a little bit musical chairs. Everyone went and put up a 500,000 square foot building, and everybody got big blocks of space. Either the entire building was leased, or 200,000 square feet, 300,000 square feet. So it's a little bit, who's going to throw up the next 500,000 square foot building, and that big tenant's not going to show up. And you don't want to lease buildings that big on a small tenant basis. So this is actually from Coville Office Properties Report. So the navy's change in supply, light blue's change in demand, and then the orange line is vacancy. And our sense is, the projection in this from 14 to 18 is probably right. And the real risk is this. As developers, we love to take trend lines and then project them in a straight line and figure they're going to keep going straight. So, in 04 to 08, we were getting after it, and then the world fell apart. And I'm not suggesting that type of event is going to happen, but you sort of see this same trend line now starting 11 kind of through 14, and the reality is we think it's going to flatten out. So if vacancy kind of stays somewhere in that 12 to 14 range, which is sort of equilibrium, we're going to be in good shape. If we really overshoot it and just keep building buildings and get largely spec, then I think potentially we have an issue. And so there's certainly going to be a need for more development. I just don't think it's going to be at the pace that it's been. And largely, back to my initial comments about the energy business driving office demand. The good thing is I think capital is being disciplined. I think on the lending side, there are pre-leasing requirements. They want a lot of equity in the deals, and I think that's a good thing, and hopefully that continues. On the equity side, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag because everybody wants to be in Houston, and so at some point people have pressure to place money in a market And I think that's going to be the piece that, is there going to be too much pressure to put money in Houston that's going to fuel development that may not need to happen? So that's kind of the question mark, but we're in great shape right now. We've had strong rate growth, highest rates ever, and the rates are supporting development. So to build a new building today at $270, $300 a foot, you're going to need 26 to 30 in net rents, and we're getting them, and so you're seeing $42 to $45 gross rents, and that's significant rent growth. So mixed use. So this is a slide I like to show folks, and because a lot of people ask us why we develop mixed use and why do we believe in it. And for us, it's kind of a fundamental investment philosophy that by combining all these uses, the value can be greater than the sum of the parts, and that we can charge more office rent, for example, if we have a fantastic hotel that you can walk to, if you have restaurant, retail, amenities you can go to, if workers at that company can live within walking distance, if we have a great fitness facility. And so it's how do you put all those pieces together to really find synergies and value. And so, we didn't wake up one day and say, that's a cool thing to do, or we just want to make our lives incredibly difficult. We believe it's a fundamental sort of investment philosophy, and it's not easy, and you gotta pick the locations carefully. I think in the sort of going back to the last cycle, where a lot of mixed-use projects got into problems, where it was really twofold. One is it was a project driven by someone who was really a product-specific developer, so meaning like a retail developer that wanted to do mixed use. And they didn't really have the understanding of how the other pieces worked. And then the other is, if they didn't really understand how the other pieces worked, then they had to go out and find that expertise. And so they had to go find, let's say, a hotel developer, or they had to go find a multifamily developer. And I think the one value we have is we're committed to doing all the pieces. And so we're always kind of the judge and jury in terms of how everything works together. Whereas in the prior example, at the end of the day, the multifamily guy might say, I'm really excited about being in this, but when push comes to shove on making decisions, he ultimately has his blinders on because his only investment is in the multifamily, so that's what he's focused on. And so it's how do you find that balance? Jay talked about Oliver McMillan's project. They're doing all of it. They're doing the multifamily, the retail, and the office, and I think that's kind of the commitment you have to make it work. I'll back up. So some of the projects going on in Houston, we've got River Oaks District, which I think will be a fantastic project. You got Boulevard Place, which is kind of evolved, with Apache owning half that property now. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I've heard rumors they're going to sell it again. They're not going to develop, and I don't know the answer. But Whole Foods is it's not open yet, is it? No. It's about to open, and they've got retail and office, and then some multifamily on the backside. You got GID's project, Regent Square. They'll have retail, office, and multifamily. You got Hughes Landing up in the Woodlands that Howard Hughes is developing. They have retail, office, multifamily, and hotel. And then just some of the things we're working on, and they've been mentioned, continuing to finish out City Center. The lower left there is actually our last office building. That'll be City Center 5 that will complete or start at the end of the year. Working on the redevelopment of Green Street, the acquisition of pavilions, and we're trying to evolve that into, as Jay said, a true mixed-use destination. We should be making an announcement about another use being added to the project in the next 60 days. And in our mind, mixed use needs 3 uses. A lot of people try to approach it as 2, whether it's multifamily with a little bit of retail. And we think this project needed that third sort of activity generator and use. And so we've been focused on that since the original acquisition. But if you haven't been down there, it's all torn up. Looks more like Beirut right now than a good retail project. But it's coming along well. We just broke ground on Kirby Grove, which that's actually the multifamily on the top left there. So that was an interesting project. It's a redevelopment of a public park. The Upper Kirby District approached us and said, we have a great park and no one's ever in it. When we go to your projects, people are always in your green space, and we want to do that. So we went through a 2-year period of creating a public-private partnership to redevelop the park into something that will look like Discovery Green at the end of the day, and then we're doing the adjacent development with office, retail, and multifamily, and we're really excited about that. We just finished executing a joint venture with Methodist Hospital. They own a tract on Memorial over by Lantern Lane. We'll be doing single-family residential, boutique office, and multifamily and retail there. And we have a great project in College Station that we've worked on we were awarded it in '07, and we just signed the ground lease this year. So like I tell everybody, if we weren't Aggies, we would have given up a long time ago. But so that's a 60-acre development, 3 phases of 20 acres each. That'll probably take us 10 years. And then we have a number of others in our pipeline. But we're committed to this type of development for the reasons I explained. And I think we're also proud of the fact that we like to think we weren't just given our God-given talents to build a building, but hopefully we can leave something behind that's positive and does impact the community. And we like to think our projects do. So thank you for having me.